Hello.
Look at us. We have all these guests. Well, Mel gave me a job and I'm going to do it. Gosh darn it. Welcome to Brave Space Live, a show about anti-oppression and communal healing. Each week we pick a hard-hitting topic and dive right into the awkwardness. And as you can see, we always start with awkwardness. I'm Tyshell. I'm a trained clinical social worker, educator, and diversity inclusion practitioner. And I did it wrong. This is my co-host, Mel. And there's some people down the bottom. And we'll see them in a second. Go ahead, Mel.
Hello, I'm Mel, and I'm an author, an activist, and a social ethicist. And I'm realizing now that I was supposed to wait to bring Darling and Benjamin on so we could have like a very dramatic entry with like a drum roll, and these are the most amazing people you're going to ever meet. And I brought everybody on too early. So anyway, this is Darling and Benjamin, everybody. They are our producers. Yay!
Somehow, and I'll say, somehow we're lucky enough to have 4 producers that we're not even at this point paying. Hopefully, we're not saying we won't because we don't turn down anything but our collars with a sponsor, the right sponsor. But we have 4 producers, and these are our 2 newest producers who are on the show with us. So we're going to hear from them, talk with them about themselves. Today's episode is Decentering Heteronormativity, and we'll talk about all of that. And Mel, did you want to say something before I start to try to introduce them?
No, please go for it.
All right. So I will do a very mini introduction, but I really want to hear from them and let them introduce themselves. So Benjamin is one of our producers. He works in client relations. Doesn't that sound fancy? He's client relations.
It does sound really fancy. It sounds very nice. Very
and Darling, who works all things social media. And one of the things that we did this season with our producers is let them pick topics. So you've already met Ben, but behind the scenes, if you've seen anything on social media, it came from Darling. So love to hear from you all. How about Ben, you start, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
He's Benjamin. You're
Benjamin. I keep doing that.
Okay.
Because my husband's name is Ben and this is
Right.
Benjamin, and that's how I keep them straight in my head. But when I'm talking, I'm like Benjamin.
That's quite all right. Hi everyone. So my name is Benjamin. As I said, I'm one of the 2 newest producers here. I like to think, how to describe myself, a perpetual East Coaster that seems to always go between very specific cities. I feel like I'm very much a tale of 2 states, which is Rhode Island and New York. And I say those 2 and not my home state of Massachusetts, because even though, yes, I was born and raised there, and that's probably the state I lived the longest in, jobs kept bringing me in between Rhode Island and New York. But here in New York, in the city where I hope to stay for as long as I can. And I figure with the show title and how that pertains to me. So I am gay with very much a capital G. That's how I like to describe myself. And
what does that mean, capital G gay? I love it.
But I don't know, because I don't know if you're starting a sentence in the A and the Y are lowercase, or I don't know, some type of declarative statement. I don't know. But I say that because
is it very much like I'm here, I'm queer, like that?
Yeah, I can put it that way. Yeah,
okay,
get used to it. I say too because I think yes, stereotypes are bad. I fit a lot of stereotypes. So like, sure, if you were to assume 9 times out of 10, you'd probably be right. But also as someone who maybe only now in the last couple of years feels like they have finally found a space for themselves in the gay community and in the wider queer community. Majority of my life haven't really felt that way because of, at least for me, I've always had, I think, my feet in different camps that would seem polar opposite, like being involved still in certain spiritual and religious communities that can be like diametrically opposed to the queer community, among other things as well. But so I was never certain where I would fit in. And I can say now at 33, I'm captain of my volleyball team in the gay league that I do, which is, I think, the oldest. I think it's the oldest gay sports league in the city. So I went from
Captain of the volleyball team.
yeah,
So
yeah,
fancy.
and we
It's
won our first
varsity.
match to boot as the season started. So we won. So we're on a good start. So that's a little of me and little pockets of my very interesting journey.
Awesome. Darling, how about you? Tell us yourself.
Okay. Yes, my name is Darling. That's my real name. I'm not
You do
making that
you
up.
do have to tell people that, because I've known Darling for quite a number of years and did not think that was her real name.
So yes, that is my real name. Actually, I can tell the sort of the story behind that because everybody has like their own spin on it. Everyone thinks it's like, oh, like they must have looked at you, your parents must have looked at you and said, oh, you're so darling. It's like, no, no, not exactly. So my mother's side of the family is from South Carolina, and there is a city called Darlington. And I have a triple great grandfather who was like named Darlington, and my mom thought that was a good idea or just cute, and she just took the TON off and thought that that would be a good interesting thing about me. So and it
That's
stuck.
cool.
I love that story.
Yeah.
That's a great like heritage
Yeah,
story. I love
Yeah,
that.
it's very cute. Yes.
wonderful.
Thank you. I was also born in Alaska. I'm an army brat, so yeah. I have to
Shell and we
return
have
as
the
it is.
same.
It's like I've
We
known
do the same. Like what? We at
because
the
I've known
same time.
Okay. We're good. Sorry to the audience. Sorry to that man, because
Like, sorry
we're
for
gonna
that.
be looking and talking to each other. We're gonna have to mute ourselves when we're not talking, because like Darling's supposed to be telling her story, and I'm sitting here like learning things about her. I've known her for like 10 years, and I did not know that.
Oh, it has been that long.
Yeah, it's 2022, almost 2023. Yeah, it was about 2013, I think,
Wow.
when I met you for the
Yeah.
first time.
Oh
But wow.
goodness.
Anyway, go
Phew.
ahead. I'm sorry. I
Well.
keep interrupting because my eyes are getting wide. Like what? Sorry,
Oh
Mel.
gosh.
Mel's gonna be like, Teshel, this is not good for the podcast. No, sorry.
No,
Go
it's
ahead,
great.
darling.
Hey, we're here to have a nice
Oh
time.
gosh.
It's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. What else? Oh, so my connection to combating heteronormativity is that I identify as demisexual, and it's one of the new. I don't want to say it's new because people we've been here forever, but but it's one of the newer talked about sections of sexuality, and that just means that I have to have like a deep connection with someone before I can become like involved sexually or otherwise. AKA, if I don't like you, I'm not gonna make it happen.
So can I tell a short story about Darling that just popped up into my head? So one of the things that she had said when we first started talking about this topic, it was like, yeah, she's like, we always talk about the dating pool, and thanks to our other producer Joe, who says that there's P in the dating pool, or one of them between her and Darling. She had said, yeah, there's not really a category for folks like me in the gray sexual, asexual, demi category on dating profiles, because you can be like, oh my God, I'd love to go on a first date with you, and if this works out, we could have sex in 4 years. And I was like, she's like, yeah, I'm totally interested in you. 4 years from now, let's go on a date. And I was like, what does that even mean? So that was it led me to doing some research and thinking, because these are, when you have privileges, you're not thinking about the other. That's literally what privilege is. Like, I have these things and I'm not thinking about others. So on that note, I think it would be great for us to talk about this spectrum of gender, and noting that today we'll be talking more about romanticism and not necessarily gender as it comes to trans identity and things like that. And if you want to learn more or hear more from us, I think it was, Mel, you said it was episode 17?
17 with Reverend Dr. Monica, who is our new favorite person. That was a phenomenal episode. Yeah, so we talked a lot about trans issues in that episode.
Exactly. And I will say, if you haven't listened to that episode, please go do so, because Dr. Monica, like Mel said, is amazing. I literally on my computer have a post-it from her when she said this quote about hope. And she said, hope is in doing the work. And it it just resonated because I do this work of IND in my everyday. And sometimes it is like fruitless out there in these streets. It is terrible. It is nothing but awful. And then, like, where do we garner hope from? And she talked about how hope is in doing the work. So if you haven't listened to that episode, she was phenomenal. She's an author. Please go listen to it. But today we'll be talking, because we are all, and we're very serious on this. We're not very serious. We're goofy, but we're very serious on this podcast about talking about our own lived experiences. And we wouldn't do it any justice to sit here and be four cisgendered people having a conversation without trans folks in the room. So we wanted to at least bring that in as we have this conversation, but talking about sexuality spectrum. And I know we're going to do a little bit of that.
Yes. So before we get into what decentering heteronormativity means, that's a mouthful, isn't it? We want to first talk for a bit about the difference between gender and sexuality. There's a lot of confusion about this particular topic. And thankfully, our alphabet mafia friends on the internet, which is what we lovingly call the LGBTQIA community, which I also identify as well, I should say. I came out of several years ago as bisexual. So we have kind of a cool spectrum going on here. The alphabet mafia represent. So we have some great graphics available on the web for this type of thing to explain the difference. So I'm going to show you the flying gender unicorn graphic. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, you can Google the flying gender unicorn. So it talks about the difference between someone's gender identity, how they identify in their own brain, mental and emotional space, might be very different from how they identify to the outside world, which is your gender expression. So your gender identity inside, your gender expression outside, and how people perceive you. And that also can differ from the gender you are assigned at birth, and your biological chromosomal sex, your hormone levels, the genitals you may have been born with. All of that can be disparate. You might experience being non-binary, transgender, woman, man, boy, girl, masculine, feminine. There are many, many different formations of human gender identity, human gender expression. We are not a binary. Anyone who tells you that is wrong. And even if you just take the population of intersex people alone, people intersex who are born with gender identity, not gender identity, gender expression or
assignment outside of
the binary.
XX or XY or chromosomal, and what that looks like for all the folks who live in between. And that, I'll say something like, we used to have this terminology, and forgive me for anyone this is offensive to, but they used to use terminology like hermaphrodite or hermaphrodism, but
we don't say that anymore.
We don't. It's an archaic term, because that actually only talked about one or certain groups, but there are 42 chromosomes, and there's hundreds of thousands of millions of ways they can be made up to show what we look like on the inside and or outside, right? So when we're talking, and this is why we wanted to show this version of this graphic, because there was a gingerbread person, which still took a male form, which we talk about, but it also was not in full. So if you can go back to the other one, and we will post this, well, darling, we'll post this on our social media so you can see what we're talking about. But there's a varying degree, or not degree, but there's a lot of variance in what genitalia looks like for folks who are intersex. There's a varying degree of hormone level, and that's in what we even would call the binary, right? Hormone levels change over time, and they do different things to our bodies. There's folks who live with PCOS. There's folks who, as a woman, as a cisgendered woman, your hormone levels change throughout your life, and especially as you get older, all of these different things. And then chromosomes look many different ways. There, a lot of people, one of the ones that people know about is Klinefelter syndrome, where there's two X's and a Y, but there's so many variations, and that's just biology. So when people say it's not biological, like, it both is and isn't, right? There's so many variations. and we'll be talking a little bit more about sexual attractions specifically
So
more
yeah, so
than
that's
what.
the so sorry. That's the gender side. I'm so sorry, Taishal. I didn't mean to interrupt you. That's the gender side of things. So just to know, we're already not working with a binary. Human
Right.
sexuality is not a binary. Sexuality in nature is not a binary. Well, we have like 1,500 species that have like been observed in nature to, have some sort of homosexual practices or activity observed by scientists. So we're not a simple, this stuff is not simple, and it can't be distilled down. So in any given moment, intersex people about 0.2% of the population, and gay and queer people, trans people probably make up between 5 to 10% of the population. So chances are, when you're walking around throughout your day, you're surrounded by gay and queer and intersex people, and you might not see it on the outside, but these are your neighbors, these are your family members, these are your community members, and so these issues might not necessarily pertain to you directly, but they definitely impact people around you, especially because we live in a heteronormative world where people do feel like they have to stuff themselves inside these little boxes that we call gender and sexuality, and don't feel comfortable being who they are in the public because they fear shame or ridicule, or in sometimes even physical danger.
I'm going
So
to shift that too, though, Mel, because
yeah.
I don't know that we live in a heteronormative world. I think our societies are dominated by heteronormative ideals, because there
Mm,
are societies of people in both lots of, I'm thinking in Thailand and in native cultures that don't have this binary. Their
yeah.
societal makeup don't have this binary that is expressed upon many people. So I'm not saying that what you're saying is wrong, because I think that's the lens that most of us think through, right? Like, we
Yes.
think through even this American lens, even when we're looking at other countries, when we think about supremacy and the white gaze and all of those things. And we'll talk a lot about all of those things as we go on today. But, we know that this is expansive, right?
I'm so glad you said that. And you're right. I was saying the world, but I mean my very specific American culture that I live in. You're absolutely right. So even, I was being normative, right? I was saying that like my normal, what I perceive as normal, applies to everybody, or should apply to everybody. So before we get too far into the sexuality and attraction part, let's dive into Ben's story. Ben, would you mind sharing with us your story? However much you feel comfortable. I'm so sorry, that noise is my dog growling at me.
I was wondering what that was.
That's not my stomach. To whatever degree you feel comfortable sharing your experience with coming out and what that's been like for you.
Well, I'm actually kind of glad you asked that question, because then I will say I will push back on the phrase coming out. And I say that because, well, for a few reasons. I know that that's the term, like, for coming out, this idea of stepping out, or the process of disclosing. For most people, sexual orientation, but could also be gender expression or even gender identity to friends and family. And I knew that's what it was called, and that is like something I went through in my mid 20s, which I would say actually makes me more of a late bloomer in the gay world, in terms of like hallmarks or stages, even in terms of like sexual development and sexual experiences. So, told people, had the classic. I think what I love, when I told my brother, he cried. Not that he was upset, he was so happy, but I didn't cry. When I told my mom, I cried. To my dad, neither of us cried. And we went to go see a movie. So I've like gone through the process, but coming out just never, that type of, I guess, verbiage, I guess, wasn't it like the feeling or the action that I felt it for me. And I just never knew what else he would call it. And I will say that the disco song and coming out is wonderful, and that also is a total gay anthem. So I love the confidence of that, which I think is what has been coming out. But looking at the phrase more, it can be claimed to be very rooted in the civil rights movement, particularly in the push for gay rights. So this very like attached with Stonewall Rebellion, like coming out, we're marching on like this real strong physical action. But it wasn't until, and I say this because I reference it. This article came out over 10 years ago by this writer named Darnell Moore. He was born in Camden, New Jersey. He lives in LA now. He's a Black gay man, and he wrote this 2-part article, and you can still find it on thefeministheadwire.com. Shameless plug. And he talks about switching the dichotomy from saying coming out to inviting in. And he even works on writings by another scholar whose name I apologize if I pronounced the first name wrong, but Sekne Hamoud Beckett, who's from Australia, and they're also of Lebanese descent and Muslim ancestry. And they have some writings about what they term coming in. And through the paper, John Moore thought inviting in is perhaps a better, or not better, that's my projection, a different way of explaining this experience, because maybe for some people, they interviewed someone, I thought this was beautiful. The closet, this idea of coming out of the closet, being in the closet is this very negative, bad place, and coming out, you were supposed to like step out and just leave the closet behind. But someone was saying in an interview, the closet for me isn't a bad place, but it's the place where I hide my treasures. It's like the closet is like a place where I safekeep things, which I thought was so beautiful. And that resonated with me because for a long time, I keep it now in a like open shelving because of space, New York City apartment. But for a while, I have this like a special box with cards and maybe like obituary notices and just like those mementos in a box but I always hid it in my closet. Like it was a very sealed off, I would say sacred space that was for me and my eyes only. And it wasn't because it was something with shame, but just something that was precious to me. And if I want to share it with you, I will, share that with you. And so I guess that same thinking goes with disclosing sexuality or sexual orientation. I think in general, it's a bit more empowering and makes it less of the responsibility of the queer person or trans person than it is more of the person who's recognizing like this relationship or this person is so important. And because I value it so much, I want to share in the full openness of who I am with you. And that is what I found that experience to be for me.
That's wonderful. And I have never really thought critically about the closet and what that's meant for, that it should be normal for gay people to hide in shame until they have the courage to
Mm-hmm.
burst themselves out and liberate themselves instead of expecting society to adjust and welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you said that, as you were saying that too, Benjamin, one of the things I was thinking about was this, not as in a different way than you described it, Mel, not as this like shameful place, but as a protective place as well, right? Closet,
Yes.
because a lot of people go into a closet in general as a young child. It's like I'm thinking this is, bear with me because this is like the psych part of Tyshell coming out, the clinical therapist part, in that Winnicott talks about, does child therapy, and he talks about a holding environment, and there's these protective environments that you can create, often like when you think as a kid like a fort under a table, where you're surrounded and you feel safe to be yourself. And that's how I've always thought about a closet versus like a shameful place. But I would say our society, especially American society, does look at it as, I think, as a little bit of both, but more so on the shameful thing, because you think about skeletons in your closet, right? And it's funny because I always tell people, like, when I die, there are no skeletons in my, like, I can't keep a secret. I can't. So if you tell me, if any of you want to tell me a secret, just tell me it's a secret before you tell it to me, because otherwise I'm gonna talk to some. I was one of those kids who never kept a diary because I'm a middle child and I have an older sister, younger sister. I'm gonna talk to them about everything. But when I think about a closet, I think about keeping your, as you talked about, Ben, your treasure and your safe place for self. But I do love the term inviting in, because not
Mm-hmm.
everything belongs to and with everybody. And as you get older, in this phase of like post 30, you're trying to like think about making friends and how much harder it is to make friends as an adult, because as a child it was like, I'm going to share my candy with that person, now we're best friends. And now you're like, ooh, who did you vote for, where were you at on January 6th, and all of these kinds of things, where you're more selective about the group. And then you're selective about even with your groups of friends, what you share with what group. And I think about it
Yes.
that way.
And I love that you brought that up, because that part I find is particularly so true. Like even in my trusted friend groups, if there's, and trust me, I know you are one of those people. I could share what I'm about to talk about. It'll be fine. There is a subset, like a small group of friends, where maybe I meet someone for a date or something, or just have a fling or a hookup over the weekend. There's within the friend group, there's a small group of friends who I know I can share the story with and not get judgment on that, because even the ones who are okay with this, they wouldn't want to, if not hear the story, which granted,
It
no,
becomes a part of lifestyle conversation
yeah, and I think,
and
I
morality
think
and
they could
things like that.
be, and I think they could still be judgy. So it's like, I won't. They don't have to know that part, but these people I know I
See, but the
can.
difference has been, I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to judge you to your face.
Right. That is true. That's true.
I'm going to be like,
So-
you are this, and then, but we'll laugh about it because in that it's an understanding of every individual, safety,
Yep.
love, romanticism,
Mhm.
fun, and this whole full expansive part of life, and not demonizing for any part of that, which I think is a little bit.
And
Go
then
ahead, Mel. Say something.
no, Mel, you go.
Oh, I was going to ask you a question. So if you want to finish that thought, feel free.
Well, again, briefly, and I would say even the people, like the friends who I do share with, I find they talk about decentering heteronormativity. I find it's because they are just either super open-minded, or perhaps they don't have like a heteronormative relationship, so therefore they can be understanding of
It's a
choices
more
around like
expansive ideal, yeah.
Exactly. So that's just something that popped in my head.
So I have one question for you, Benjamin, and I'll ask Darling the same question a little bit later. Benjamin, how do you experience, this is a really broad question, so feel free to answer however you like. How do you experience gender and sexuality in the world? How do you experience that? You don't, obviously don't go into gory detail, please, but
Oh my gosh.
like, in general, like, what's your experience of that in the world? How does that show up for you?
That is such an interesting question. I feel, well, probably because the easiest thing I can think of, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's really interesting to see how it shows up with participating in this volleyball league, if to be honest, because I've never, just for probably no one's surprise, was not athletic growing up, if anything. I like to joke and say that any type of sport that I was mildly good at in middle school or high school was, and this is totally stupid to say, but I would call them like country club sports, like badminton, tennis, volleyball. Although you could say volleyball really is a sport. The
You're
people
so
because of the
fancy.
beach and other things, but and trust me,
I was like, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I know exactly what Ben's going to say because I've known him for a while. And when he talked about being like the stereotypical capital G, I was just thinking like, and this is why we joke and talk, because stereotypes are fine when they represent a person and not a broad brush of everybody. But
Exactly.
Ben is, if you don't know Ben, I'm going to share this about him without his permission here right now. He's a golden girl, okay? He is quintessentially like at least he's like 25% of each person on that show. So if you like imagine him, that's exactly like you can walk into a place and go, oh yeah, okay, that's Ben, right? Like 25% Dorothy and 25% Blanche and 25% Rose and 25% Sophia. I would call Ben, and we used to when I used to live in New York City with Ben, we used to call him like we would give him all old lady names. Gertrude.
Gertrude was a popular one.
Chip in his pocket, y'all.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And things like, I love playing canasta, so I can get it with all the Jewish grandmothers. And then I love to go bowling. So it's oh, that's a good point. But I guess so then moving through, very much, your artsy fartsy theater, all that stuff, music. And still not so much doing theater, but taking dance classes and all that stuff. Started doing volleyball because of other gay friends of mine who did it, and I watched them. They played great. But even experiencing that, it's like the inverse of what I experienced in gym class, because I feel like how sexuality occurred, we could even say gym class, like just when puberty happened and seeing, at least in presentation and physicality, what other boys looked like. But particularly, I remember I had a classmate, who knows when they started working out. But I just remember like middle school locker room were changing in between class, and he was just ripped. It's like we're in 7th grade, and like you have a 6-pack. Like what? I think I was more so just amazed, just out of curiosity, like how can the human body do this so young? But I digress. Seeing that, I think, put an impression because I saw what maybe the plans of what the ideal looks like, and realizing that that was so not me. And this is still an issue I think most gay men experience due to like the adult film and pornography industry, and like what's considered the ideal male form, which changes depending on your like who you're attracted to, but that could again be like a whole list of episodes. So seeing with the being on the volleyball team now and being involved in this team where I have to say I love my team. This is like a great season and everyone else is wonderful. Seeing how I can play more into my sexuality or be and even be playful with my sexuality in space, and that's the norm and not the like the difference. Like I think we can be playing and maybe someone gets a great pass, someone scores a point, and we're really good about cheering people on. But it's so funny when people are cheering and I'm watching sports and I hear people cheering and it's not just clapping, but it's like, ooh, it's like, yes, work, and people are, finger snapping. And I have said, if this is what gym class was for me growing up, how different I think things would have been. Um, and experiencing that now, it's like, oh my God, this is so this is so great. And even just in like the clothes we wear, like, maybe I can wear, a pair of short shorts one day and we can be fun and silly with that, but that's fine. It doesn't get, the wrong types of stares or that feeling of, oh, if I walk someone who sees me wearing this, are they gonna like, come after me and not for, a good reason. Um, yeah, I think doing volleyball has really not like in some ways it's healed old traumas, because not that I do think there were some memories of gym class and my own struggles with that when I first started playing volleyball was really coming back at me, especially when you're doing warm-ups and they're making us do drills, and so you really do think of gym class. But it's definitely helped me, I think, get over and just kind of flip those bad experiences into look at this now in your 30s. It's great.
Thank you so much. That was a great. I was not expecting the answer. That's like kind of encapsulates so many different issues in one story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Darling, can I ask you the same question? How do you experience gender and sexuality in the world?
Hmm, that is a really good question. Well, so when you ask that, I immediately think about like just how much like I understand, like I have like leaned 100% into being a woman, like the in the most femme way possible. I love it all, but like I can like trace like over my lifetime like how like I struggled with that. I think like always I really hate if someone could like figure me out before I said. So there was like a huge chunk of my life where it was like, oh well, pink is out and excuse me, only blue, and like blue is still my favorite color to this day. Um, like Caribbean water blue is very specific. um, but like and now that I'm older, it's just like, oh well, like that was insane. Like you can't control what other people are thinking of you. Like just do what is is right for you. Um, but I also have to think about like how I like maybe put that on other people, like because like other people are struggling with that. If you have dysphoria, like I've had friends who have transitioned like after I met them, and like they this particular friend like didn't want you used to identify as a woman, and then decided to their pronouns are now they them, and they don't wear makeup anymore, and so like our relationship was like kind of like based in that, and then we had to change it because like they that like kind of brought up negative feelings for them. So being a woman and everything that means, and like the juxtaposition of going up against men, or like living in a world with men, comes up a lot for me. And then I heard once that like we're all made up of like masculine and feminine energy anyway. Like you can't get away from that. It's just like we're not allowed to like experience that because like only one is supposed to be good. Like anything feminine is weak and terrible, and like anything masculine, well that's fine. It's great if women have those characteristics because we're supposed to have those, and like men are not supposed to have anything feminine or soft and all that. So yeah, like, and I can see that playing out for me. Like when I have those tendencies, but like it's like, well, yeah, like this is normal. Like you're not supposed to be 100% anything all the time. There's like fluidity and so much of everything that we experience that we've been told is a binary for so long. So it's been interesting to like step into that.
You're on mute, Mel.
You're both raising such important points that the concepts of gender and sexuality that we've been taught, that we've been socialized from a young age, they're really arbitrary. Like the fact that girls have to wear pink and boys have to play sports. Like, who decided that? Where does it come from? I mean, it's not based in anything, but just these weird.
Shocker, answer is white supremacy, y'all. Like that's just
it's
literally the answer to literally all things.
Really.
Yeah, I mean, and it's capitalism, right? It's like selling girls pink things and selling boys sports, and the more that stuff is marketed to us and pounded into our brains, the more those categories are reified and perpetuated and normalized. Which brings us back to this question of what is normativity? What is heteronormativity? And how the heck do we decenter it? So I want to ask each of you to chime in on that question. Tashelle, you want to go first?
So one of the things that makes me think about is like my own socialization as a young girl, right? I have never, sexuality I think has changed throughout my life, and I think more of my siblings are part of the LGBTQ alphabet mafia than not, right? Like my older sister is bi. I have a younger brother who's gay, a younger sister who's gay, and a younger sister who I'm not sure what she's doing from day to day. Like in general, like all parts of her life. I'm not just talking about her sexuality, right? I was never. I did a lot of human sexuality learning in undergrad, but my mom told me recently that I had wrote an essay in second or third grade about how gay people should be able to get married. Don't remember this essay, but I do. I have a plaque for a writing award, and I was asking my mom what it was, and she was telling me that. So young Tashelle has always been a vigilante for justice, right? Like I'm not new to this. I'm true to this, but I was thinking about my own socialization, and I was going to tell this story on our last episode about culture being a costume, but I thought it was kind of fitting here in that I remember one of my youngest Halloween costumes I remember was a bride. And it's such a weird thing. It was also a dress that I got made. I was a flower girl in one of my This is so fitting for the last episode. We will do a celebration because it's the last episode of season 2. But my aunt has been married 4 times, and in her 3rd wedding, I don't know. I can't even know. I don't even know which one it is. In one of her weddings, I was a flower girl, and there was this huge white dress that I had with gloves and a purse and the big ruffle socks to match. And I wore it for 4th grade graduation. I wore it for Halloween. My mom was like, "You're going to wear this dress." But I was excited to wear it for those things. And I just remember this thought process and socialization of what heteronormativity is and what all of these things mean is the socialization of young girls and the thought process of getting married. And I can always remember wanting to get married. And at some points in my life, that getting married meant being married to a man having children, right? And I'm still a part of that structure. I'm married to a man and we are hoping to have children. But along the way, all of these different thought processes go into that. What does marriage look like between 2 people who are not cisgender? What does marriage look like between more than 2 people? What does marriage look like without this white picket fence? So when I'm talking about like capitalism and white supremacy, it's that structure. It's not that you can't have those things. It's like, what lives outside of that, and how can other people be a part of it as well? So for me, it's this just socialization. I remember me and my sister, and this is also how white supremacy racism is another branch of that tree. Me and my sister used to put stockings on our head and pretend it was long hair, or put a pillowcase on our head and with a headband and pretend we had long flowing hair, because that's what princesses have, right? And for whatever reason, I was Paula Abdul and I was going to marry Michael Jackson. It was the 80s. It was the early 90s, because I'm not that old and my birthday's coming up, but it was, and my sister, and we would exchange, and my sister was Janet Jackson, but she couldn't marry her brother, so she was going to marry Bobby Brown. I would not want to marry Michael Jackson or Bobby Brown as I've gotten older and realized who they are. Also, still love Michael Jackson, but and and Bobby Brown and Paul Abdul and Janet Jackson. Like, maybe I'd marry of all those four people, I'd marry Janet Jackson. Like, to be honest, who wouldn't? But I just remember always thinking, get married. You put, when you're a little girl, well, not every little girl, but in my case, you put a pillow under your dress or whatever. You were pregnant. All of these things that I didn't like look for and have and do, and they just become a part of me. Like, just being like if you ask my husband, and I like calling him my husband, but even in that thought process, like we got a ketubah because my husband is Jewish, and we made sure the language was equal and partnership and all of those. I didn't have my dad walk me down the aisle because I don't believe a man should be giving me away. What it means to be equal parenting and equal care tasking in your home, and all of those things have changed throughout my life. But what does this thought process render? And if you one of the things I was going to say is, if you ask my husband, like, I hate when people say, the only person that can say queen to me is like a gay guy, right? Like, call me queen. And and you have to specify it's with a W, because I hate the thought of monarchs and princesses and all. Like, I don't want to tell my child, daughter or son or intersex or whomever they are, whatever gender they are, is that they're a princess and a prince, and because that goes back to supremacy culture and monarchies. But I hate that thought process. Like, I hate, and I'm sorry I'm saying it so strong, but I really do not like, this is personal, you can do whatever you want, but Tasha, I really don't like when people say we're trying to build an empire. I'm like, you are not. Strip all the kings and queens and the tiaras away from that royal family, and like, I hate it. I'm like, we're trying to build I hate that thought process and that conversation. I don't even know what question you asked me, Mel, and I'm going off on my tirade, but this is where I'm at, and I'll toss it to somebody.
Okay, so the question was to decenter. So what is normativity? What is heteronormativity? And how do we decenter it?
Okay. All right. I'll go back a little bit and then I'll toss it to Darling. For me, heteronormativity is this 2.5 white picket fence, man, wife. And also, I think what goes under that then is religion, right? Is the man is the head of household, and the wife, and then after that the kid. Like, I just dislike all of that, because I don't feel like I need to be led by some person because he has male genitalia or whatever the case may be is. So for me, decentering that, which is not always welcomed, because I grew up in a Black family, and more American Black families are akin to Christianity because of slavery, right? I'm not a Christian. Although I do practice more of a monotheistic style. I would say I'm spiritual, not religious, right? So I'm not a Christian. I believe in more egalitarian, I don't think relationships can stay 50-50, right? In everything. Like, there are some things that my husband is really great at, and there are some things that I'm better at, right? And they go both, they oscillate. We oscillate in our relationship of what that looks like. I do end up doing more of the cooking in my household, but that's because my husband's a terrible cook, right? But what that looks like is it decided upon between us. And I remember, and I'll say this and I'll toss it to Darling, is the first time I brought my husband to like one of a family gathering, and I was telling and this is very Black for our two for Benjamin and Mel, that we were having like a family gathering, and my mom was like, "Oh, are you gonna fix Ben a plate?" And I was like, "No, he's fix his own damn plate." But in the Black community, that's a thing. Like, you fix your man a plate. And I was like, his fucking fingers aren't broken. Like, what do you mean? And it made me want to run so far away from it. But I don't mind making food for my husband or fixing him a plate. I just don't want to be told that I have to do it. And one of my proudest moments was I was at a pool party with Ben, my husband Ben, and we were sitting down, and there was a little girl who said, "Is that your boyfriend?" I was like, "Yeah, he's my boyfriend." She's like, "I want to have a boyfriend one day so he can bring me whatever I want." And I was like, "Yes, yeah," because she saw him bringing me stuff, and I was like, "Yes, that's what you want, him to bring you stuff like that." Anyway. So that's my thought of what heteronormativity is and how in my life I decenter it. Darling, what say you before I go off on another tirade?
Amen to that last point, by the way. Okay, so decentering heteronormativity and how like that looks on me. I think so going back to what you were saying about like being kind of like geared or reared towards like being a bride as like a personality trait, like that has definitely affected me. Um, and here I am pushing 40, and like nowhere near it, and having like a small existential life crisis.
Right. I was
But
gonna say, what happens is you start to think you failed because you didn't get there. Right. Like, that's
right,
how society is reared up.
yes. So I've had to challenge all of that, just so I could sleep at night, because it's like I mean, like if I beat myself up for that, or were to let anybody like tear me down for that, like it would just affect me, it would make me have a bad time, and like that's why. So now I have to think about like well, first of all, like I have such awesome platonic relationships. So that's another reason why I have been single the last couple of years, as long as I have. Like, not just because it's hard being demi, and even though I have been on the apps are not great, not for everybody. Someone once asked me like, "What does that mean? Do you worship demons?" I was like, "Oh God, okay." Yes. Yes. so so like it's like that makes it difficult. Being a black woman, a larger body makes that difficult. Um, what the heck was my point here? Decentering heteronormativity. Okay, so like I have such great platonic relationships. Like those are the model for like the type of love that I want. So it's just like I know what like that this kind of love is out there. These people that love me so much no matter what, and they want me to win. I am like, even if it's like not with them, I'm safe with these people. Like they're just so encouraging. And so like that's what I think about like for future, which or for the future, which is difficult, because like how is that going to look like if I don't marry a man, because I'm I definitely, in my demisexuality, I still seem to be unfortunately wired towards men. That is what I got. So I'm working with it. But I always say I won't close the door, because like, if I am somewhere and I meet, the woman of my dreams, well, I'm just be like, nope, can't do it because reasons, absolutely not. Like I don't have time. So like, so in the future, like if I, when, creating a life, or buying a home, and thinking about children, and just how I'm going to spend the rest of my life, and what that's going to look like who is it going to be with? Like I have to think about those things, how it's going to look, and all the paperwork that comes with that, because a lot of people, when you are married in a heteronormative relationship and you have children, you got to talk about insurance, all those things, like who can visit you in the hospital, like all these things come up even for same sex couples. So like these are the things that I think about now, like just being okay is the goal. And like whoever is in the room with me when that happens, I'm like, great, just want to be happy, just want to be good. So that those are the things that like I have my eye on now.
I'm so glad you're talking about demisexuality, darling, because I think just talking about this alone helps to decenter heteronormativity, because a lot of times our culture likes to perpetuate this Hallmark Channel kind of conception of love, that it always has to be romantic, or like the Tinder or Grinder conception of sexual attraction, that it's just pure carnal, anonymous sex or whatever people do these days. It's not my jam, but okay, whatever. But so I want to show another graphic. So this is, I loved this question. How do you want to be loved and be loved? And these are 6 different types of attraction and love that people can experience. Some people experience all of these different types of attraction. Other people experience very few or none of them. And but most of us experience, in the very least, a platonic connection, and those platonic connections can be incredibly fulfilling. They're not typically stereotypically sexual, but they're still just as meaningful and important to our lives and our mental health and our well-being as other types of love. So I think normalizing these different types of attraction and celebrating them is really beautiful and important. So the 6 types, if you can't see the graphic, are sexual, physical, emotional, intellectual, practical, spiritual. I've also seen aesthetic on here. Like you're attracted to the way someone looks or carries themselves or dresses, and you just love being around them because you just love to look at them. Like there's all kinds of different types of attractions and ways that people are wired. So and I'll finish my thought with one story. I was talking to a friend and who's a cisgender dude, and he was like, "Oh, what's this demisexual nonsense? What are people just creating all kinds of weird sexualities these days?" And I explained what demisexual actually meant. It means that, you need to have a strong emotional connection before you might consider having a sexual connection with somebody. And he goes, "Huh, I think I might be 3/4 sexual."
And well,
That's fine.
I was like, "Great."
one of the things I think is interesting there is this is what used to be the terminology used to be sapiosexual,
Uh-huh.
right? And they moved away from that language
Which
because it
meant,
can be
sorry.
intellectual.
Yeah, attracted to intellect, yeah.
Intellect, but I think in as we get this more expansive language, which is a gift and not a detriment, I think people should look at it that way. One of the, and I'll say this, one of the ways that I engage in how I do facilitation for DEI work and therapy is that every person intrinsically has value and the capacity to learn, right? And I say that because it's a gift to be able to learn new things and do new things. But I think the part of moving away from sapiosexual is because it can be inherently ableist, in that you can only love people who have a certain amount of intellect or a certain kind of intellect,
Or education.
right, or
Privilege.
education.
Yep.
And so it's this more expansive way of looking at attraction. And I think that graphic that you put up about with the pie chart about love, I think is a really interesting one, because more often than not, I would say I probably experienced some aesthetic attraction to women. Like I just think women, like I always tell people my favorite people are Black women, right? And that's aesthetically because of how and what they look like and what they do. And I think, often people are attracted to some figure that reminds them of being mothered, right? This is me going into that like Freudian, Erikson, Winnicott, not in the Freudian way where you want to have sex with your parent, no, but just this you're usually some figure in your life, more often parental when you're young, not always, right? But you get this love, and you think about that with teachers, with other adults, and you see them as what the pinnacle of beauty is, in this engagement with who they are. And Benjamin, you can talk to this as too, because even in the gay community, it is some form of woman. It's the gay icons, right? You think about these women, and it's still a mothering thought process, right? Like, I don't want to sleep with Serena Williams, but everything about her is beautiful. I don't want to sleep with, and I'll leave Madonna out, Cher, but everything about her is beautiful. And I just think it's this thought process about how we engage with attraction and aesthetic, not that you necessarily want to engage in physical sexual intimacy with that person, but some sort of intimacy. So I want to hear from Benjamin. I'm going to keep calling him Ben because there's too many Bens in my life.
It's okay.
But I want to hear from Benjamin that same question of, I think you said, how does heteronormativity show up in your life, and how you decenter? But Mel, we're not going to let you get away without answering it either. So I want to hear that from you. But Ben, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sure. I feel like I should have thought about decentering heteronormativity more. It's not that I try to, but I guess it depends where I am and what's going on. Because I also feel like where I am living in New York City, I know some people who are I feel like who could answer this question and would be all in about like, smashing the hetero cis patri, like all whatever the abbreviations I've seen for like what this whole system is embodying, all the isms. So I feel like I know people, or I'm not too far from neighborhoods where that is the norm. And then I have know other people, some who are personal friends of mine, who are gay, but they live, some I would say very much almost like a Leave It to Beaver type of life. And that also differs too, I would say, on generations. I'm thinking of like a few different couple of friends of mine who span different age groups. Um, but I know folks like that, and they wouldn't want that interrupted at all. So it's, and I bring those up too because I think within these conversations there's this idea of what does security look like, or how that looks and feels. And there's, I think when I hear like decentering normativity or whatever, I might even think of what was it trying to tie?
Question though, Ben. So
Yeah.
my question, I have a question for you in that. When you think
Yes.
about those groups of friends who do keep
Mm-hmm.
that heteronormative
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle, what does it look like, or could you do they fall in line then to racially and um, uh, demographically when it comes to income, right? Because if
Sure.
two
Yes.
white gay men is going
Yes.
may look very different than two trans or black or brown poor people, right? Like there's a very big difference there in what normativity, because one of the bigger, and I don't want to get too far into this because this would have to be an completely entirely other episode, but when we
Mm-hmm.
think about that, within the LGBTQ community, what falls along monetary and racial lines looks very different in queer and LGBTQ communities. Whereas I've heard a lot of people, advocate for QTPOC, which is queer, trans, people of color spaces, conversations because of these things. And I heard someone talk about marriage equality, and one, how we don't have marriage equality. We don't actually have it because people who are disabled are not able to receive the same kind of rights and to money and all of those things. But then also because some people have said that in the LGBTQ community, white gay men stopped caring after marriage equality was granted, where there are so many other issues, right? And I know we've talked about that before, but it is so. I was wondering if those groups of people who want that heteronormative lifestyle, and I say that's actually more of a lifestyle than being gay or whatever, is this lifestyle that affords them wealth and privilege, right?
Yeah. No, I'm glad, as you were saying that, I was thinking of some of these couples in my head, and it does differ where they are in terms of their socioeconomic status. Some I can think of that they're both white, some that are, I think, more biracial, and then maybe a couple that are at the same income, like high income bracket, than others that's more, again, like mixed socio. Maybe maybe one has a 9 to 5, the other works in the arts, or maybe, and then maybe if they're both, creatives, like what that looks like. But yeah, I think it's totally, like, it's definitely linked. And even I think of interrupting heteronormativity, I think maybe Reverend Dr. Monica, I don't know if you talked about if like pronouns came up in your conversation with her, but even just pronoun, not just introducing yourself with pronouns, but making that um, become part of your like introduction, how that interrupts. And I remember being like, I'll be very honest, when in my former life in higher education, I worked at a leading arts and design school in the United States. And in working with the students there, maybe every other person, it would be their name, pronouns, and then go in. Oh, the dogs. We love our dogs here at Brave Space Live. And I would hear that, and to me, I remember feeling very defensive and irritated, like,
No,
what a
you say
bunch.
that. I think her dog barked right when you were saying what you were saying. It's okay.
It's all
You
right.
were saying they would introduce themselves with what pronoun or
Okay, it'd be their name, their pronoun, and then continue on. And just hearing was also irritated as maybe, an extra 30 seconds of time that just adds up. So like that's what I was thinking. It was feelings of defensiveness and irritation and lots of, oh my gosh, this is such liberal, you know what. So I'd introduce myself, but I wouldn't give my pronouns. So I remember being very resistant and thinking, you know what, like they all can do that. It's just not for me. And then after really working and getting to know both professionally at the school and student body, I'd say non-binary and trans people, honestly, really realizing like where's the harm, right? And so from there, I started including pronouns start introducing myself. I do that more now, but using it in my email signature. And I remember my very last higher education position, it was at a Catholic school. And I included my pronouns, and I will say for this environment, I never was given flack for being gay or talking about the things that I talked about while there. But I noticed, I think I was the only one for months that I'd see emails go back and forth. Maybe it's father this or father that, and then it's my name and pronouns. And just noticing, and even within like being in student affairs, I was noticing that I was one of very few people having pronouns. I thought, but student affairs, like, wouldn't we all be about this? And near the end of my time at that school, there was little by little, I saw just a bit more, but I didn't realize how much of an exclamation point that looked in that environment when maybe in the previous environment it was just a period. It's like such a, like the context of where I've been, I realize really plays a role, I guess, in what the decentering or disrupting heteronormativity looks like.
I think about that too, what you're saying too, because to me, in the outside, I work in the corporate world, and it's such a big conversation. But I'm like, I heard a trans author and activist say it's the ground floor. It is like the lobby. It is like using the correct pronouns is the lot. And I think I want to be at that place. I want others to be at that place, but not, you can't force people to do certain things. But this, like, I'm just so, it's such a, it's not a tired conversation, but it's like, to me, it's like basic level conversation. I'm going to address you because, like, I work in environments that I've heard people say, like, I don't have. I heard a person say, I don't have pronouns. I said, you will if I use the wrong ones. Or they'll or in in the social media world, we don't have pronouns. We need to go back to the Constitution. It's like the Constitution starts with a pronoun. We, the people. Like, and who was that written for? That dusty document written for, and not for, sorry for the constitutional people out there, but it wasn't written in mind with any woman, black, white, native, any otherwise, and it wasn't written for gay, anybody else, and it wasn't written for, you know what I mean? So thinking about that. But Mel, I said we won't let you escape this question. So what does heteronormativity look like to you, and how do you decenter it in your life?
Yeah, so I think a lot about normativity is, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So normativity for me is like just a fancy word for saying what's considered normal by a particular culture in a particular time. And if you can think about it as like a bullseye, like a target, and what's in the middle, center ring is normal, and everything else is kind of like rejected and shameful, right? In like a tight normative structure. So I really love the word disrupting, because in order to expand that circle and include more people into what's considered normal, we've got to move those boundaries. And people do not like when their boundaries are messed with. It's uncomfortable, it's disorienting, it might feel threatening or taboo. And certainly we shouldn't get rid of all taboos, right? There are some taboos that are in place for a very good reason, because there's psychological harm involved. For example, child brides. We do not marry off children, because that's a taboo that should be in place, because we know that that's psychologically damaging. Sorry, Tyshell, to your Halloween costume from childhood. You said it. You
would not have had been a bride at 5.
I bet you were adorable. Anyway, so for me, normativity is complicated because I am a bi person married to a cis man, a cis straight man. And so it would be very easy for me to hide away in my little you know, in the woods where I live, and not say anything about the fact that I'm attracted to women as well, or and queer people. I'm actually probably more pan than bi, but anyway. Um, so I made a kind of a difficult choice to come out to my conservative family while I was engaged to my cis male straight partner. And so it came out in like 2018, so pretty late in life, like in my 30s. I was raised extremely conservative, and I didn't have the language to understand that what I was experiencing when I had, you know, what I look back now and say are definitely crushes on girls, or feeling very nervous or fluttery around specific girls because I was like, they're so pretty, and I, you know, felt attracted, or feeling uncomfortable when I was in the locker room and saw naked women, like not understanding why that caused a reaction for me. Um, you know, when I can look back now and be like, oh yeah, I'm freaking gay. Like that's obvious. But it took me so long to figure out why. It took me an entire marriage where I, you know, I got married, had a like a quote unquote white wedding, like didn't have, you know, was a virginal bride, and was married to a man for 4 years. Got divorced, and then kind of had this liberative moment where I dated around a lot, and I had a lot of new experiences that I had not previously had, and was like, oh wow, I like dating women too. Wow. In my late 20s. Whoa, where is that coming from? So so I could have kind of kept, I guess I could have kept my head down and been like, oh, maybe it was like a phase that I was into girls, and not told anyone, and especially knowing that it would cause my family a lot of pain, because they are the word homophobia is tough for me because they are not hateful people. They are very, very loving people, and I don't want to let them off the hook completely, because, you know, I feel like they have some significant work to do. But they've never ever said a disparaging word about gay people my entire life. They have tried to be loving and welcoming, but at the end of the day, they do not embrace gay marriage, and they do not believe that gay people are born gay, or that God could ever condone gay love. So so it was a very strategic decision on my part to basically make my body into a political site. We talked about that with Reverend Dr. Monica. I believe that's Audre Lorde, that, you know, our bodies are political, and come out to my family, come out on Facebook, even though I like didn't really have to, but it was important to me to stand in solidarity with the rest of the community. And it was important to me. It is still important to me to advocate for gay and queer people and trans people, because they're my neighbors, they're fellow humans, they're part of my community. And I think I just have so much privilege as like a cis straight passing person, that I haven't had to deal with a lot of the, pardon my French, but like absolute bullshit that some gay people have had to go through, and the trauma that a lot of gay people endure just for being who they are. And I want to live in a world where everyone can be free to be who they are, you know? So
it's just so interesting that you talk about that too, because I've had some of those same experiences that you're talking. I've had girl crushes, and I think if you're an avid TikToker like many of us, oh, not Ben, but we to Benjamin, we have to get him on there more. Then it'll be like, oh, there's a bunch of like 30-something-year-old women realizing that they're bi, because or open, right, in that way, because you start to get like the thirst traps and the women and all of these things. And for me, I would say that I would categorize myself as straight, but also look at this as such a bigger, expansive, what that looks like, right? Heteronormativity in general, because I think if I'm looking at men and being like, I'm attracted to my husband in all of those, in those 6 categories, but I just think women look better than men anyway. Right? Like I just do. Right. So I think about that, but I don't know. And this is where you get into the gender versus attraction and sexuality. Like, I don't know if I would want to be in a relationship with a woman, or I think about those things, but just men in general, I experience more of that 6 with men than I do with women. But you know, you could say that I've had that like college where you make out with a girl, and it was in all of these different things. And I've never seen myself as like oh, I'm not a part of this, or I'm a part of that, or these kind of conversations. However, I think about it as this expansive, you know, looking at the Kinsey scale. Kinsey goes 0 to 6, I think, which I think is like wild. But because I think like 0 and 6 is like, I usually when somebody says give me something on a scale of 1 to 10, I don't even like that scale. I'm like, no, because 5 is average. Like, what are you saying? So 0 to 6 freaks me out. I'm
Can
like,
you explain what the Kinsey scale is for people who don't know what that is?
So the Kinsey scale, 0 to 6, and I can't remember which end is which, so you'd have to look this up on your own, but 0 being completely heterosexual and 6 being completely at that time, because it was 50s, Alfred Kinsey he does the studies of sexuality, is gay, right? Very gay, I'm only attracted to the same sex, or very straight, I'm only attracted to the opposite sex. And he talked about sexuality as a spectrum versus one thing. Thank you. Benjamin told me I'm right in the there we go, the Kinsey scale, right? So 0 to 6. And it's this, what it looks like somewhere in the middle. And we have a graphic that now I'm giving Darling a bunch of work so she can post all of these things later. You can take that down. But one of the things I think about with that is that I don't like 0 to 6. So, I mean, he also was doing the study in the 50s, I think, 50s, early 50s, late 60s. I would actually make that like a 0 to 100. And I was watching a channel on YouTube where they they were asking 100 people, how gay are you? And even the straight people were like, I'm at least like 10% gay. I'm at least like 7%. Right. And I think that if we look at it as 100, I got it. I was saying this to my husband the other day. You got to give me like 30%. Like, I'm like 30% gay. Like, I'm like, look at this, look at that, look at this. And that's more of a, and even when I think about my friendships, right? Like, there are 2 people in my life I can think of that I can be my complete self with, that I've loved. I literally sent my best friend, who is another Black woman, a text message earlier, and it was one of those, it was the Devil Wears Prada, where you text your friend, like, I need 10 scarves from 10 or 15 scarves from Calvin Klein. And she instead of like, she knew exactly where I was going with it. So she was like, I don't have DeMarshall on the line. She had answered all of it because she knows me, right? And it's the same thing. And I'll give you one other example of that, and how like this platonic love lives, is that one early on dating my husband, which is like 10 years ago now, for his birthday, I took him out for his birthday and I dressed him. Like, it was a black jacket, a white shirt, and red pants. We go to my best friend's house and she's wearing the exact same outfit, a black jacket, a white shirt, and red pants, and black shoes. And it was like, this is so wild. How are they dressed the same? But I dressed him. And she and I are on this plane of understanding in life that's just so, like, I can't imagine that with many other humans. And the only other person I can imagine that with is my husband, right? And I said this to I said, the next time I said to my husband, if we don't work out or you die, my next marriage is purely for money. Or, like, I'm joking, but like, I can't imagine, like, I don't want to know anybody else's favorite color, man, woman. It's going to be me and my dog, right? Like, that's the kind of thought process about what this heteronormative structure looks like. So when I think, I would go expand Kinsey scale from 1 to 6 to 1 to 100. And if you expanded it, how many more people would see themselves on that scale at different places? And this is, I think, where people come from in the phases of life. I do think people go through phases of their lives where they're more attracted to this than that and this than that, not sexuality being an overall one of them. Like, oh, you like girls and that's a phase, or you like boys and that's a phase. No, but more of like, this is what I like. This is who I'm thinking about. This is who I am. And because more of that phase that you're going through is about self.
Yeah, we evolve as humans.
Right. So think about it that way. And this is not in any way, I don't want people to confuse this with like trans people are going through phases. There are people who go through different phases of their life. But if you ask many, many trans people, they knew when they were children, like they knew. And it wasn't, but they may go through phases. Maybe there are phases that I want to do some gender affirming, and then, you know what, F the world in the way the structure is set out, and I don't want to do that. Or they go through different phases of who they are, but we all go through those different phases of life. But so I don't want anybody to try to use that like, oh, they're just going through a phase, because even if that's true, people get to live in their truth in any and every phase of their life.
Yeah.
That's at least what I think.
We had like 18 more topics that we didn't get to. So we're going to have to do more episodes on this. So I'm going to turn it to last thoughts. Darling, we haven't heard from you in a while, so let's hear from you. Last thoughts on this topic. What do you wish people would know about decentering heteronormativity? And we could say centering queerness and normalizing queerness. What do you wish the world would know?
Oh wow.
That was a big question,
That's a
Mel.
big old
Right.
question. If you need some
Tell
time to
me
think,
what
I
your
can go
Right.
final
first.
thoughts are.
That we've been here. Like these concepts, these things that we're talking about, we have the language for them now, but they're not new. We've been here at the same amount of time that time and space have been here. And we can all fit. We all can fit and have purpose. There's like 7 billion people on Earth, and to think that all of us should fit only like a handful of yes or no or black and white boxes is insane. Like just like and like I think I don't know if we were talking about it like off air or on air, um talking about oh my god, my train of thought. Right. Um
No, this
okay,
is
so
awesome. Yeah, there's space for
right. So
everybody. We don't have to
yes,
compete. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, like we were talking about like whether how progressive folks should work on getting others to accept anyone in the margins. And I'm like, you don't even have to accept it. You don't have to understand it, but you should have compassion. Like these are people, and we are always worth it. And so it's just like, and you should see yourself in there, like somewhere. It's just not necessary to want to hurt people or ostracize these people or make life harder for them. Like it's hard enough. Period. Like stop. Like we've been here, and there's a purpose for all of us. Like we don't have to do that. We could be doing so much other stuff with our time and our energy.
You
I love that answer. That was amazing.
You
Yeah.
said something, darling, that really resonated, and I know I want to. This will lead us at a whole other thing, so I'm only going to say this short piece of it. It's just this thought: if we decolonize, decenter, and all of these things, it works for not just one sector, right? Like we're talking about this in a heteronormativity, but it works for the medical field. Like we can't scale everything by one type of person's bodies because there's 7 billion, as you said, there's 7 billion people. So there's 7 billion bodies, and we have to really be able to look at schema and then extrapolate. So I was just thinking about that. But Ben, what do you want people to know as you think about it? What are some of your final thoughts? And we say final, we'll have to revisit this because this is such a rich conversation. But go ahead, Ben.
I mean, I love what Darlene said, and I hate for maybe my response to get a little dark or sobering. But I think just remembering that when people look at decentering heteronormativity, which could simply just be queer people in general just coming into their own and living their lives, that things like homophobia and transphobia kill and still do. I mean, of course, the statistics for specifically Black trans women, at least in this country, in terms of being murdered, is disgustingly high. Um, but there was just recently, I think it was somewhere out more so in Eastern Europe, but it was flooding gay Instagram and social media that I was seeing. And it was this young couple, and content warning for what I'm about to share. So going into subject of death, apologies. Young couple, like really cute, and they ended up committing suicide together after sharing posts of them like being all cutesy and just being what normal couples do, holding hands, sitting on a bench, waking up together. And it's like, damn, that's still like this still, they weren't even trying to prove anything necessarily. They're just trying to be themselves, and that still cost them, that somehow pushed them to a point where their thinking was like, uh, to them thinking there is no space in the world for us, which like is so not true considering what Darling just spoke. Like there is a place for for everyone. So like stop particularly stop killing our trans brothers and sisters, and stop killing us, because as Darling said, there truly is a place for everyone in this wide, wonderful, alphabet mafia that we have.
I'm going to shift language just a little bit instead of saying committed, but died by
Oh, yes.
suicide.
Thank you.
So that language is there too. And
Appreciate that.
I also, so going back to the little bit of a lighter, I love Alphabet Mafia the same way I heard a neurodivergent person say neurospicy. I love it because it's real. I think I love this reclaiming and this jovial sense of being, right? Like that we all get joy. And I love that people get to claim that. So Mel, what are some of your thoughts? And don't leave us so quickly, all of audience, because we are going to talk about, because this is our last episode of the season. So if you've been following us, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but Mel, on the topic, what are some of your thoughts that you'd like to share?
My thoughts dovetail with actually what both Benjamin and Darling said. So I think what I've been impressed upon, through thinking about this topic is how important it is to resist consumerism, because a lot of gay people have achieved a bit of cultural acceptance in that, people will joke around, oh, I wish I had a gay best friend to go shopping with, or they enjoy the compliments like, yes, queen, get it, or whatever. But I don't think a lot of straight people understand that radical love and acceptance that they are experiencing the outflow of has been created on purpose from such deep pain from so many gay folks who have been utterly humiliated and traumatized and rejected from their families, that gay folks have had to create their own chosen family. The word chosen family, I believe, comes out of gay culture. So don't just consume the happy rainbow parts of this without understanding Stonewall, without understanding what gay people have had to fight for and overcome. I'm going to cry. There's so much.
You made it so far without growth.
There's so much pain there, so don't.
Yeah.
Understand the whole story and don't take that radical love for granted, because it doesn't happen by accident.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're celebrating gay people, celebrating queer people, know that the beauty that gay people are able to create in their lives is a rebellion. It's a political and cultural rebellion against things that have been entrapping and pressuring and destroying life and joy for those people. That is a rebellion. See it for what it is.
Yes.
I love this, and I'm gonna kind of
Amen. Wow.
Right. Amen. Whew.
pull together, I hope, some of what you all said, because and I want to give props to where this culture, right? When people say that, when we think about Rainbow, when we think about Stonewall, it was a riot. It is a community on purpose. As Mel is saying, we have to give props to Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, and folks who are Black and brown trans people, because without them, we'd be living very separately. There wouldn't be a community to even be a part of. So much of all of popular culture and things that we love come from Black and brown and trans people. And we owe them so much. The language, the popularism, right? We owe them that. And I think so much of that is so important, because we don't want to commodify this community. We want to not appropriate this community. We want to celebrate and live amongst, right? When people tell you that they need space from whatever dominant culture, we don't get to be a part of every single thing. As a straight person, I don't get to be a part of every single thing. As a white person, you don't get to be a part of every single thing. As a whomever, right? In this dominant cultures, because they need space and respite from us. And we need space and respite, right? So we all have to understand that. And I just think it's so important, right? Because so much of it is born from what we would call Eve and the Black woman of our cultures, right? So thinking about, and I say Eve and the Black woman, thinking about Marsha P. Johnson as a part of that group, because I think about women as an expansive group, as an umbrella term, and different people's lived experience lives under that umbrella term. So I think it is so important, because from dust and it makes me go back specifically to Maya Angelou in her poem Still I Rise, because so much of what communities have built is because we were given rubble, right? And I'll say this, even thinking about barbecue, right? Barbecue has a history in racism because um, enslaved people were given rotten and poor meat, and they learned to smoke it to get out maggots, and they learned to give it flavor by adding vinegar. So they turned something terrible into something that we all get to consume, but we need to know that kind of history, right? And I think that that's just so important with so many communities. And I'll say this kind of as a point, as a period on that a little bit, is that when we all get to color outside the lines, we can see what is more beautiful and who expansive who we can be, right? If we pull away, and this is a great point to end on for this season. If we think about white supremacy as a whole and what it doesn't let us have, and we're not talking about individual white people, we're talking about this overarching system that doesn't really work for any of us. And we'll keep talking about this when we come back next season as well, is that if the limits and the bounds were taken off of us, who could we be? Who would we be? Who would we get to be, right? Like, if you have to color inside the lines, you only get a certain picture. And especially if someone else makes the picture for you and you get to color inside of those things. So when we think about this, it doesn't fit for any of us. The highest rate of suicide is among white men. Why? White supremacy, right? When we think about what is racism, it's this box on who can be. When we think about homophobia, it's this box on who can be. And if we think about that, wow, maybe to Mel, to your point, for your friend, maybe they thought, oh, maybe I am 75% straight and 25% gay, because now they see that the box is more expansive than what was originally told to us, right? So I think about that for so many limitless things. Now, we do need guide rails sometimes, right? But they can't be the only, right? It has to be this expansive notion of who and what can be. And I've gotten the chance to go to Stonewall and party there, but also to take in that history and being a part of a community. This is why I tell people allyship is not the first step. It sounds fuzzy like friendship, but really it's 6 steps in, because you have to be in lockstep in service to and in part of a community to understand, to be an ally to them. And we'll keep talking about these things, but I just really I really admire, and I always pay homage to my foremothers and my 4 people, right? And I say that, and I'm a person who I got a lot of posted quotes, and one of them is for I am an ancestor and a descendant, right? I'm an ancestor to those who come behind me, so I need to light that pathway, but I'm a descendant of the folks who came before me to light the pathway of where I am, right? And I always go back to it, because I'm looking at this through the lens of a Black person for myself, is that there was one person who made it through the Middle Passage, enslavement, the 60s, for me to even be sitting here. And if you think about life from your own lens, right? Mel from your lens, Benjamin from your lens, Darling from your lens, what that looks like for you to be sitting in this spot, it makes it so humbling. I heard a Jewish proverb that talks about God created the earth especially for me, but I am but dust to the world, right? You think about how big and how small you are, and hopefully you've gotten some of that conversation from this, because it is such an expansive part that we could sit here and not feel hate and but feel close, right? As we've gotten over this season, our second season of conversation. And I could have just this part of the conversation for like another hour and a half. But I'm just so glad to sit in community with all of you. And one of our producers is backstage and another one is off doing work things, just to be in a community with all of you, to be my full self, right? And for all of us to be able to do just that. So I'm gonna put my soapbox away and
That's a great spot to end, though, because celebrating like with a moment of wonder. Like, isn't it amazing we get to do this and have these conversations, and this community has come to mean so much to me. You all are such just phenomenal people. Thank you for being my friends.
Exactly. I don't know how we got lucky to have such 4 great producers to be able to be in this community for brilliant, amazing people. So I want to say thank you to Alicia, to Joe, to Darling, and to Benjamin as we close out season 2. Mel wasn't here a couple weeks ago when we actually hit our 1 year anniversary, but this is our 20th episode.
Yeah.
2 full seasons.
Most isn't it like 90% of podcasts? Isn't it like 90% of podcasts never make it past past episode 7? So we're already ahead of the curve.
And I say that knowing that there are production people that I have engaged with and know that you're like, oh, I can't wait for this podcast, and then they just don't keep up with it. So you are looking at people who have full-time jobs, who do lots of other work, who don't even live in the same part of the country, be able to do
different time zones.
But to be able to strap this to our backs and do this because we love it so much. I just got one of the best compliments that I wanted to share with you all. I mentor someone. I won't shout her out. But she said to me, I listened to every episode in 2 weeks. I told her about the podcast, and in 2 weeks she had listened to all 19, I think at that point, episodes.
Oh my gosh, thank you, person.
Right. So I will let her know we shouted her out on air. So when she listens to it, they're going to talk about me. Right. So it's just such a wonderful thing. So we are at the end of season 2, and we will be back. It was in season 3 in the new year. So happy all the holidays that you celebrate. Halloween, Diwali, Jewish holidays, Hanukkah, which is not a major Jewish holiday, Christmas, all of those things. Happy New Year. Yuletide, the Festivus for the rest of us, all of these things,
all of it.
Three Kings Day and All Souls Day and All Saints Day, all of those things. We will see you in the new year. Stay connected to us on social. You can find us in all the YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. We will stay active there, posting the things. Go vote in a week, about just over a week.
Early voting is open for all you New York City people. I need to early vote this weekend.
So myself included. All of those things, but stay connected to us because we'll still put things out. One of the things I really wanted to make sure we say is that we want to hear from you all. What are some of your show ideas? What do you want us to talk about? What questions do you have? We're gonna do a mailbag episode where we just answer your questions that you have. So send those to us on whatever socials that you use. I don't know what else I'm supposed to say. Mel, what are your thoughts as we end out today on our 20th? I'm so proud of us.
I'm so proud of us. And thank you to all our listeners. Y'all are amazing. The questions you ask, the energy you bring. It's really fun to build this from scratch and be meeting so many cool people. Thank you to all our guests. We had just phenomenal guests.
Both seasons. So lucky with such amazing guests.
Yeah, we just go find people we like, and we're like, "Hey, will you be on our show?" And they generally
somehow they're like, "You're not a complete idiot, so sure." And I'm like, I don't know how we got so lucky.
So if you listen to the show and you know somebody who would be a good guest on the show, please get in touch with us. We're always looking for other new people to talk to and interview. And just thank you to everybody for helping us make this happen. It's just such an honor and a delight. And thank you, Tyshell, for your amazing energy and your joy. And whenever I get too intense, Tyshell is like, okay, I see you, but also like, remember to laugh. Like, it's great.
And I have to return that same thank you because, I met Mel through Benjamin, and we talked about that in our very first episode, but I had this idea and she was like, yeah, we can do that. We should do that. And I was like, I've wanted to do a podcast for the last 10 years of my life.
I didn't know that. 10 years?
It's just been so long. And I was like, I started back in the day when people were becoming content creators. I started a YouTube and it was like fashion. And I was like, this doesn't feel like me. And this feels so much like me that it feels like work, but it also feels like the best form of work I could possibly do. So nice. with a little bit of ingenuity and Mel's know-how, we've been able to bring this to you all, and we do it for us, but for you, right? And I want to continue that. So give us suggestions for season 3. Stay tuned to find out when season 3 will come off, because we are 6 people with full-time jobs who work and live in different parts of the country. But this is so much fun. And I've never left a conversation and been like, why are we doing this?
Well, that's
And
good.
and I'm sure in every episode we go, this could be a whole episode. This could be a whole episode.
Yeah.
There's just so much to talk about.
I didn't realize this was a lifelong dream fulfilled. Oh my God. That's amazing that we can
and hopefully
do this.
one day a full-time job, because the man, as they say, is out there, and it's, pay me to do exactly what I love to do. But I love it so much. And my best friend said to me, Teshelle, you love this work so much, you do it for free. And I was like, yeah.
In a perfect world, we get paid to do the stuff we but this is important information. These are important conversations. So, the more we can get out there in the world, then good. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry to my dogs. Thank you to my dogs for being mostly patient.
Like,
as long as we're thanking everybody.
Outside, I know I fed mine and gave him some treats. But
we can wrap up. Yeah.
Exactly. So
yes,
thank you all. Keep listening. Stay tuned to our social medias. All of those things we said we will post. We'll make sure they get posted, and we will see you in season 3
in 2020
next season.
Bye, everybody.
See ya. Bye.